If you have prediabetes and your doctor's still telling you this, those both can be happening at the same time. So this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart because, of course, I'm a type 1 diabetic, which is almost the opposite end of the spectrum of the insulin resistant state because I just don't make that insulin. But diabetes is something that we've been lied to about quite a bit. With diabetes, especially insulin resistance, it is most definitely reversible. You can take that A1C of 6.4 or 6.5 and you can walk that thing back and you can become a non-diabetic according to the numbers themselves. And so this is going to be that insulin resistant state that we're seeing. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because we've had a lot of people in their 20s and 30s come to us and tell us that they're experiencing prediabetes. But their doctor or the people around them are saying, well, don't worry about it. We'll just wait till it turns into diabetes or we'll just see how it progresses. Well, in most cases, prediabetes is going to become diabetes. That's, hence the name, pre-diabetic. You're trending that direction. And unless you make some certain changes, that's going to perpetuate. That's going to keep happening. So let's unpack and figure out what prediabetes actually is. And let's determine if it just is baby diabetes. So, prediabetes, what's going on here? We have started down the road of insulin resistance. And so what's going on here is essentially your mitochondria has been inundated with entirely too much glucose. There's too much sugar coming to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria can't keep up with the load. And so the mitochondria is going to put the kibosh and say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. This is too much. I'm going to stop production for a while. And it tells your cell to downregulate your insulin binding sites. So that tells the body to make more insulin. And so if the body is making more insulin, then our insulin level is going to rise. So the more important marker to look at whenever we're talking about prediabetes is actually insulin, not your blood glucose. We'll see with your A1C and with your fasting glucose that it's starting to tick up, that it's starting to rise. But what's most important here is to actually look at the fasting insulin, because insulin is the one that tells the story. Insulin's the issue, whether it's a type 1 diabetic state or a type 2 diabetic state or a pre-diabetic state. It's always insulin, not so much blood sugar. Blood sugar is the result. For a type 1 diabetic, we're going to go sky high because we don't make insulin. For the type 2 diabetic or the pre-diabetic, there's a lot of insulin floating around. There's too much being forced onto the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is saying, hey, listen, that's too much. I can't handle that. We are going to stop production for a while, and it's going to down-regulate those insulin binding sites. And with those insulin binding sites being down-regulated, what happens is your body only knows that there's blood sugar levels increasing in the body, and it wants to fight desperately to get that to go down. And so as it's doing that, it's going to produce more and more and more insulin. And that's just going to drive more and more and more glucose into the cell. And so that cell, that mitochondria, is not going to like that, which means that we're going to keep increasing blood glucose over time, and then we're going to keep increasing insulin over time. Now, there's a first and second place here. First place is going to be your insulin. Your insulin is going to keep rising first, and that's why we always want to look at that insulin. But then the glucose is going to be that secondary effect that's going on. Getting back on the subject of the pre-diabetic state. So what's happened here is we've started to notice that your blood sugar has started to rise just a little bit. Maybe we're not at 86 or 92 anymore fasting. Now we're starting to get to 95, maybe 99. Maybe we've hit triple digits now. Maybe we're at 100 on our fasting glucose or higher. And our A1C is starting to reflect up. Maybe we're at that 5.7, maybe we're at 5.9, maybe we're at 6.3. We're just about at the cusp of diabetes at that 6.4 A1C. But what's happening in the background here is the fact that that insulin has been rising and the mitochondria has been inundated with too much of that glucose, and it keeps putting the kibosh on things. It keeps saying stop. So where does this come from? It can come from multiple different places. You can stress your way into diabetes. As we get stressed, our cortisol levels are going to rise. Whenever our cortisol levels and our adrenaline starts to rise, what happens is your intestines are going to give the signal to vasoconstrict, because your body doesn't care about making babies or digesting food whenever being chased by a bear, hence the stress that's going on. Normally it's just a work email that we have, but our body only perceives it one way. So that cortisol level is going to rise, and what that does to your liver is tells it to put out your glycogen stores. it's going to take glucose, throw it into the bloodstream, so that way you can fuel the big muscle cells to escape the invading tribe or that bear that's coming. The issue is we're really stressed sitting right here, and we never use any of that energy. So then the body says, well, we got to get rid of all that glucose in the bloodstream. Let's put out some more insulin. And if this is a chronic state, if we're constantly stressed, then we're constantly running this cycle. We don't get a break from it. So that's one way that stress can contribute to an insulin resistant state. So another way that we can start to get towards this diabetic state is if we have poor sleep. If we have poor sleep, then what happens the next day is you're almost as insulin resistant as a type 2 diabetic. And so if we're constantly having poor sleep, then we keep leaning that direction towards insulin resistance. After it happens for so long, then we're going to become insulin resistant. And then the third way, and which is kind of the biggest lever that we can pull, is going to be your diet. And so it doesn't mean that we're eating a poor diet, that we should be ashamed of our diet. But something that could be happening is you could have an allergen to a food that you're eating. If you've got any amount of bloating or any amount of, and we'll say leaky gut or intestinal permeability, then if you have grains, a lot of times those grains and those proteins that come from the grains can keep irritating the gut lining. Same thing with fiber. Fiber is great whenever we have a healthy gut. If we don't have a healthy gut, then fiber can do a lot of damage internally because we don't have the keystone bacteria that breaks down fiber. We actually, as humans and our bodies, don't have the ability to break down fiber. That is our gut bugs, our gut microbiome, that's going to break down the fiber for us and give us those useful pieces that come from fiber. But if we can't break it down, it can cause issues, can cause more inflammation, causing more stress. Those proteins are going to escape into the bloodstream. The immune system is going to tag those, get them out of here as it should, but that's going to cause a lot more stress on the system, going back into that stress thing. So we can combine the two of those, stress, diet, but then also, of course, with the diet, if we are eating a lot of carbs, if we are eating a lot of sugar, the standard American diet, the SAD diet, is going to be very, very carb heavy, very, very grain heavy. Grains pretty much just break down to fiber and sugar. That's going to be the main things that you get from grains. There's a few other little bits in there, but mainly we're going to be looking at starches, at carbs, at sugars, a little bit of fiber. But going back to what I was saying, if we are eating a standard American diet, we're having a lot of carbs, well then there's the answer to our insulin resistant state, that the diet itself is causing a lot of inflammation. One of the most inflammatory pieces of our diet is sugar. Sugar can be extremely inflammatory, and you can link sugar to a lot of today's diseases. So that's going to be the biggest lever you can pull, kind of that third point I'm talking about there. It's going to be the diet. But then again, say that you have an allergen to a food. Say that you're eating eggs and you can't process eggs very well. Or say that you're eating shellfish and you can't process shellfish very well. Maybe you're not having a huge reaction. Maybe you're not breaking out in hives or going into anaphylaxis. But what could be happening here is just low-grade inflammation inside of the body constantly going on because you're eating that food item, once a week, once every other day, once a day. And that can be causing stress on the body, leading more towards that pre-diabetic state, or the diabetic state. But that all being said, I just wanted to give a brief talk about insulin resistance, where it could be coming from. A few actionable steps that we can take here is 1, get better sleep. Start prioritizing your sleep. An hour before bed, throw in some blue light blocking glasses. Of course, I would say get off your phone, but the vast majority of you guys are not going to get off your phone. I don't either. We own Chronically Healthy, so there's a lot of business that has to happen, and you're at the beck and call of the business at any point in time. But that being said, toss on some blue light blocking glasses, start blocking that blue light, let that brain get the signal that it's time for bed, start to wind down. Have a routine that you can start doing that makes your brain and your body know that, hey, it's time for bed. Try to get in that cycle as best you can. Number 2 is going to be handle that stress. So whatever you're in control of that you can control with that stress that's going on inside of your life, just make sure that you are starting to prioritize yourself. Start to fill your own cup, because if you don't fill your cup, you can't fill anybody else's. I know there's a lot of mom guilt out there. There's a lot of dad guilt out there that if you do anything for yourself, well, you're taken away from the family. I would make the counter argument that if you do something for yourself, you're filling your cup, so you show up better for your family. So take that stress and try to mitigate it as best you can. The more you can pull those cortisol levels down and that adrenaline down, the less of a response we're going to have from that glycogen store from the liver, and then we are going to be able to not have the insulin resistant state perpetuate as much, or that pre-diabetic state that we're all starting to see in our 20s, 30s, 40s. And then the last piece here, let's focus on a few less carbs. There's actually no essential carbs. Do we need energy for the cell to work? Of course we do. But as far as that goes, your body is going to create energy from proteins and fats. And so your body has a natural process. Pull the carbs down a little bit. I'm not saying get rid of absolutely everything. Don't scorch earth on this. Just take a few of the carbs down, and that should help you to lose weight and drop that insulin. Slight sidebar here, and fun fact, insulin is the driver of fat. So insulin will take that glycogen, throw it into the fat cell, and you will store that energy, store that fat, increasing fat. And if insulin's high, glucagon, which is going to be the other hormone that drops your fat, can't rise. It's going to be nice and low. And so we want to get the inverse of that in order to lose weight. So if you start taking down the carbs, then that glucagon gets to come up and we get to lose weight. So little sidebar there, but those are going to be kind of some actionable steps that we can take right now in order to start to reverse our type 2 diabetic state, or if we're not in a diabetic state yet, to start making sure that in our pre-diabetic state that we stay away from that. So if you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. I will be glad to have a conversation with anybody about any of this. Also, you can visit us at chronicallyhealthy.xyz if you have any more questions, if you want a free consult, anything like that. But I just wanted to hop on here, have a conversation about something that we're starting to see a lot of prevalence of. 93% of the population is metabolically unwell. So let's change that. Let's get things changed on here. So share this video, like it, and if you have any questions, that's what we're here for.